I'd like to give you an overview of the memoir that we're working on. What I would suggest is going to the date 9/26, clicking on details, and you'll be able to see the guidelines and the rubric for the memoir. A memoir is just a piece of writing about your life, and you're going to be choosing a topic and writing about it. Throughout this unit, we have been looking at different mini lessons about different techniques that you can use in your writing and different parts of the memoir. So we've talked about leads. We will talk about conclusions. We've talked about techniques such as show, don't tell. We've talked about using sensory details. Sensory details are those details of the senses. So smell, taste, touch. We've talked about a theme. Your memoir will need to have a theme or some idea that it is about. It shouldn't be just a catalog of details about an experience. A theme or an idea should come through, and we've talked about how to reveal that. We also talked about a technique called movie behind the eyelids. So there's a rubric here that talks about what you need to do in your final memoir. For instance, the movie behind the eyelids paragraph should be highlighted in blue. You can use red font where you reveal theme, underline places where you use sensory details, label 3 instances where you practice show don't tell using green. You're going to need to have 3 lead possibilities and then explain in 2 or 3 sentences why you chose the lead that you thought was best, and you'll have a conclusion, and underneath this you need to write why the conclusion is successful. And then you also need to follow the requirements, which can be found on your guideline sheet. MLA heading, 1-inch margins, size 12 font, double space, at least 600 to 2,000 words. So those can be found on my website under the date 9/26. And if you're wondering more about the other things that were required on the rubric, we have gone over those in previous days. For instance, showing not telling can be explained right here. It's instead of saying I was angry, you would write what would be physically happening to you when you were angry. You would talk about eyes twitching or having a red face. So instead of just telling I'm angry, show that to the reader. And then we read a memoir in which that was done and talked about how it was done. Before that, we talked about movie behind the eyelids, and there is on the second page of this handout talks about what movie behind the eyelids is. It's about slowing down your narrative and adding a lot of description. And so on Wednesday we read an excerpt of the book Black Boy and talked about how Richard Wright used movie behind the eyelids. What we did is we kept a little chart like this as we read this excerpt, and we talked about the techniques he's using to create this movie behind our eyelids, this very descriptive writing. And so we talked about using multiple adjectives in our description. We talked about using figurative language like personification and metaphor. We talked about using alliteration like wind, whistle, and consonants like before, a fireplace. So we went through and looked at that. This was not homework in the sense that it was not taken for points, but it was helpful for us to see examples of movie behind the eyelids techniques. On other days, we talked about leads, and so you can look at my examples of different leads. You can look at this document here. This document here shows you how to, just a second, it'll open, tells you what a lead should do, gives you a bad example of a lead, and then it gives you 3 different ways to start your memoir, 3 different lead options. Again, that rubric says that you will have to have 3 options done, and then you choose your most successful and explain why it is the most successful. So you can look at that as well. And if we go back to the website, before we talked about leads, we talked about theme, And what we did was we read some memoirs. So, for instance, we read Fish Cheeks by Amy Tan. And after we read it, we thought about the idea that the memoir was about, and we thought it was about being yourself. And so then we thought about, how do we understand, how does Amy Tan get across that the theme of being yourself? And after you read it, you'll probably have some ideas. Some of the things we came up to were dialogue, words with strong connotations like littered, the description that is used to create a tone. Internal monologue was just the narrator's thoughts. Sometimes it comes through in the introduction, sometimes it comes through in the conclusion. So we thought about how theme comes through in our memoirs as well. Before that, we just did some quick writes to come up with some different ideas for our memoirs. So if you're struggling to come up with a topic for your memoir, look at this brainstorming prompt document on the 17th, and there will be some ideas for your memoir. If you have questions, please let me know.